Next, as the Gulf Coast moves to recovery mode after yet another storm. In this week's It's Not Too Late, our Ginger Zee looks at how human activity has left these coastal areas vulnerable to storm surges and devastating flooding. But with the help of a few local groups, efforts to rebuild and restore are underway.
I'm Ginger Zee, and it's not too late. Right behind me, that is a steeple on a church here in Mobile, Alabama, after Hurricane Sally blew through. That steeple hanging precariously. We had 82-mile-per-hour gusts on the backside of what has been the third hurricane to make landfall here along the Gulf Coast, the fourth hurricane to make landfall in the United States this year. We are well above average, and we are now at record setting this early in the season for this number of hurricanes. We also had Mobile Bay pushed back out into the ocean. It's called anti-surge. The images you're seeing there, me walking on that bay, should be filled with water. And it did fill back in. But on the other side, Pensacola was overtaken by water. Sand was covering the roads in Dauphin Island, all thanks to storm surge and feet of rain. Now, when a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast, it can be even more damaging in the way of surge. And that's because of how the continental shelf works and really how the beaches work under the water. For example, on the East Coast, they drop off. The continental shelf there is steeper. When a bubble of storm surge approaches the East Coast, some of it can get deflected or absorbed. It can act kind of like a wall. The Gulf Coast, on the other hand, has a very gradual decline, and that can act as almost a ramp to bring the surge right up and inland a whole lot farther. There are some natural obstacles like barrier islands, dunes, and even oyster beds. Those are like little speed bumps that absorb some of the surge and the waves. But here's the thing, we've taken away some of those speed bumps, and now the surge comes right at us.
But when we moved here, we wanted to be able to drive on roads, and there aren't any rocks on the Gulf Coast. If you've not been down here, we don't have a lot of those. So what happened was we went in and we dredged up a lot of these oyster reefs. But when we did that, these reefs that were 8 or 10, 15 feet tall in some cases were gone, and you lost that buffer.
And now, decades after those centuries-old decisions, somebody, us, have to pay for it.
We wanted to develop oil and gas in those areas, and we thought that all made sense. It didn't, but we argued with ourselves, we'll have so much resources as a result of this that we can pay to fix things.
And now we're paying for it.
And now we're paying for it. In 1897, in National Geographic, there is a debate, an article about the science about leveeing the river, in which the scientists state very clearly, if we do this, generations 3 or 4 hence will have to pay for it. Yeah. Well, it's our turn now. Yeah. Here we are, gladly.
Louisiana's coast alone lost more than 1,800 square miles from 1932 to 2010, and that is greater than the size of Rhode Island. According to a state report from 2004 to 2008, alone, 300 square miles of marshland were lost to Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Gustav, and Ike. A ProPublica report found that Louisiana loses about a football field of land every hour.
The erosion that we see here is natural erosion, but it's been exacerbated because we've put shipping channels in, right? We have navigation channels so that we can access these areas. The problem that we have is sea level is rising incrementally. And can our habitats keep up with that? And that's what we're working on. If we can reset that clock a little bit, if we can feed those marshes with this beneficial material, you know, the mud from these channels, we're going to help that system become healthier.
As that land erodes, we are more vulnerable to flooding, storm surge, and of course, sea level rise.
And now that we've added sea level rise to that, it becomes even more problematic. That also meant that we lost that land, which was our storm protection, which are the buffers, so we could live far enough in that we had that land between us and the sea and the storms. As we lose that, we become more vulnerable to the storms that we're seeing now.
Steve Cochran works with the Environmental Defense Fund and Mississippi Delta Coalition. They're trying to find natural ways to rebuild the coast and limit the impacts of storm surge. Because storm surge is going to happen. Sea levels are going to rise. And we have to find a way to protect ourselves now. Is there a day that we rebuild the Mississippi to what we found it? Can we do that?
I don't think so, and I don't, you know, we actually use the word restore, and we're trying to figure out, is that the right word? Because that leaves the impression that we're going to put it all back the way it was.
Yes.
We're definitely not going to do that here in the Mississippi Delta. We can have a sustainable delta. It will be smaller than the one we have now, and certainly smaller than the one that was here 300 years ago.
Off the coast of Alabama, there's a project called Lightning Point, where the Nature Conservancy folks and the folks that live there are rebuilding the area around the fishing port.
We've now buffered that whole port against storm surge. So that's the first line of defense. And not only does it have just a series of breakwaters out there, it's got an ecosystem. It's got a marsh, it's got the uplands that are in there, the ridges protecting the tidal creeks, absorbing that water before it comes in. And if you can think about these things as, you know, bumps, you know, moguls out there in the water, they're breaking that wave energy down. So even if they're underwater, you know, when those waves travel across the bottom, it's stopping that energy. So whatever is reaching that shore is so much less severe.
One study found that rebuilding natural barriers like the oysters, that can save $50 billion in storm surge or flood damage.
And the more we can build that land back that used to be there, the more that we can regrow the cypress forest that used to be there, the more protection we get from those storms when they come.
These projects are not perfect, and they have to act together, because alone, it just won't be enough. We have to, because we want to protect this beautiful land. I'm Ginger Zee, and I promise it's not too late.
Like to hear that promise, and we thank Ginger Zee for that.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.